She is approaching 20 years as the owner herself, year 17 for you. And as we chatted about yesterday on our show and also across all our social channels, the Happy Cook wins the battle with Williams-Sonoma. And it's also a check mark in the Barracks Road column. Barracks against Stonefield right there. And it's another indication that Charlottesville prides itself in supporting local, and I think an indication, and we'll get all this analysis from Monique herself, because she's in the trenches, of offering experiences and credible customer service, knowing your customers and their spending habits and what they like to do in their homes. The Happy Cook embodies all those elements. So we'll spend 20 minutes with Monique. We also have Charlottesville City Councilor Michael Payne joining us at 1 o'clock. School reconfiguration in the city of Charlottesville is going to run between $75 and $100 million. And to cut to the chase, the money just isn't there. So they're talking about raising the real estate tax rate 10 cents for $100 of value at a time when assessed values of real estate have gone up 12% on average in the city of Charlottesville, and at a time when inflation is making a gallon of milk, a pack of bacon, or just like pumping gas in your car extremely expensive. So we need to talk about the gentrified nature or the regressive nature of increased taxes and how they could potentially damage or hurt the citizens we're trying to help with school reconfiguration. So a lot of real topics to cover today on the show, which is what we try to do. Real commentary on the program, stuff that matters. Judah, we are in your hands. We can rock and roll when you're ready. Guys, good Thursday afternoon. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love CVille show. Thank you kindly for joining us. We are live in Charlottesville, across the Commonwealth, the country, and the world on the I Love CVille network, a network powered by crazy fast internet, Ting Fiber Internet, the power behind the I Love CVille network. We thank Scott Wagner of Scott Wagner Integrated Medicine for being a part of the show, and of course our friends at Skooma Boutique Dispensary on the Charlottesville Downtown Mall. Certificates of analyses for everything in the store, Skooma Boutique Dispensary. Very proud of today's show. I think today's show you're going to, for those that don't know her, meet just a visionary businesswoman, Monique Mosher, the owner of the Happy Cook. You'll meet her in about 30 seconds here. She and her husband Steve and her family are the sweat equity behind a brand that this community adores, and it's the Happy Cook in Barracks Road. 44 years of equity in the community, 17 with Monique leading the charge. In the 1 o'clock hour, Michael Payne, a Charlottesville City Councilor, to answer your questions about school reconfiguration and a potential 10-cent real estate tax rate increase that's now advertised in the newspaper. Look, we understand school reconfiguration is done with the premise of narrowing the educational gap that undoubtedly expanded during COVID. But I got to ask this question. If we have to raise taxes associated with real estate, will we not gentrify out of this community the people that we're trying to serve through school reconfiguration? That topic for Michael Payne. Judah Wickhauer is our director. Let's go to the two-shot. Let's welcome Monique to the program. You got a heck of a lot of people watching you right now, Monique. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. Complimenting you again on the fabulous haircut. It looks absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
You look great. And then for the very few that do not know you in this community, who's Monique?
Yeah.
What are you all about?
Well, my husband and I have owned the Happy Cook since 2005. So that is what we have been spending many, many hours on over the past 17 years. We have 3 little kids as well. So we are busy all around.
Happy Cook and Barracks Road, you guys are the market leader, even more of the market leader with the closing of Williams-Sonoma and Stonefield. When you saw they closed their doors, and you knew it before we did, what went through your mind and Steve's mind?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, definitely when Williams-Sonoma, when we heard years ago that they were planning on coming to Stonefield, I mean, it was definitely something that we were concerned about. I mean, we knew how great our customer base is and that they would be supporting us, but still, it's nerve-wracking to have a competitor like that, you know, less than a mile down the road that directly sells a lot of the same type of things. So that was definitely scary. But we learned to coexist and actually did well over those years. But it's great to not have them right down the road and just to be the sole kitchen shop in town.
If you want to give Monique some props, put the comments in the comment section. I will relay them live on air. If you want to relay some positive messages, put them in there. Like David has done, the market leader, Apex Predator. This is a belcher right there, offering that perspective. All right, so let me throw this to you here. Give me the flip book of emotions that come with a competitor like Williams-Sonoma opening in Stonefield. Initially the feelings,
yeah,
and then how they subsided, and then the feeling today.
Yeah, sure. I mean, definitely, interestingly, we knew when we purchased the business in 2005 that Williams-Sonoma had their eyes on Charlottesville. So that was something that we kind of actually knew historically, that they were looking to get into the market. We just didn't know, when or where. So that was something, it is interesting that was kind of always in the back of our minds, was that someday they were going to be coming to Charlottesville. So definitely it was a little nerve-wracking when they opened up. We just weren't exactly sure what that was going to look like. We ended up having our best year to date, or at that time, the first full year that they were open was an amazing year for us. So that definitely let us know that it wasn't something that we had to sweat too much, but it was definitely nerve-wracking knowing when they were just about to open up. So, and then over COVID has just been so amazing with the support that the local community has had. I feel like that was something that, from a morale perspective, it was so great for myself and my staff, because we just heard over and over again during COVID, I think people around Charlottesville just realized they had to support local businesses, and they would go out of their way not only just to come in, but to say, we really value you as part of the community. I'm shopping here with you today because of that. And that was really a great support, particularly during those first parts of 2020 that were a little dicey with when COVID started. So, but the support has just been amazing. So, but it's, even though Williams-Sonoma didn't turn out to be a huge hit to our bottom line, we still did well while they were here. It is nice to not have them open down the street.
Johnny Ornalis watching the program, the owner of Guadalajara and El Mariachi. Chef Mick Markley over at, I believe now Boylan, former chef at Mangione's, watching the show. If you want to give her some props, put it in the comment section. I will relay it on air. What does it say about this community? We know, and we pride ourselves in doing this, of championing local. We know this town is all about supporting the folks that live in the community. I think it says that. I'm curious of your take on it. I'm also curious of how you guys, I hate to use this word, it's almost cliche, but like pivoted or adapted during this pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. For sure. I mean, Charlottesville has always been a super supporter of local businesses, and I think that is something that, like I said, one of the things that when we knew that Williams-Sonoma was about to open, we weren't overly concerned, because we knew that we had this built long-term relationships with the Charlottesville community. We had these people who would come back and we were parts of their life. So we weren't overly concerned about it, but not all communities are like that. We're very lucky. Charlottesville, we're part of a group of different kitchen shops across the country, and for sure we live in a unique community in that way. And so that has been crucial, both just over the past number of years, but particularly over COVID time period. I think our community really stepped up, really went to put their money where their mouth was and really go both to support them by shopping locally. We had so many people who said, I do not want to buy this on Amazon, I want to buy it from you. And it was so supportive and so nice, particularly because we knew that it was during the COVID days, even harder to shop in person. So we, as you mentioned, we did pivot a lot. We changed so that we had a lot easier where people could shop online, do it for curbside pickup. They could support us but still stay safe, do shopping over the phone. We did Zoom consultations, and people would shop while we would tour them through the store. But over and over again during those early days, we heard, we want you to be around, and that's why we're shopping with you. So that was just super encouraging.
A lot of comments coming in. We'll get to some of these questions. This is from the restaurateur, Johnny Ornalis. Are you still offering the in-person cooking classes?
We are, yeah. So we actually did, one of our pivots was that we did shut down online. We shut down in-person cooking classes during COVID. We switched to online, which turned out to be something that was actually something that some of our supporters on Facebook suggested to us to do, and we did very quickly, and was amazing for us. We actually got written up in Forbes for our online cooking classes. So we still kind of do that on the side. We actually just had a contract with a corporation in Finland that purchased a bunch of different online classes with us. So we actually sell our online classes all over the world. So we've done events across the world with that. But we did reopen our in-person cooking school as well. So we're currently offering cooking classes in store where you can come and do hands-on cooking classes in store, 10 people at a time. So that's a lot of fun.
This question's coming in on LinkedIn. Are you having issues attracting labor to the Happy Cook?
We have some amazing staff who have been with us for a long time. So actually the vast majority of our staff members have been with us since well before COVID came around. So we are lucky in that we've been able to hold on to those staff members. It was a little bit more difficult at the Christmas season when we do try to maybe staff up a little bit extra with maybe some fill-in help. So that was more difficult than normal. But luckily, because of how amazing our staff is and that they've stuck around, and that's been amazing. And so that's helped us navigate that much better.
How about and this is something that I think we talk about often, Barracks Road, City of Charlottesville, Stonefield, Albemarle County.
Yeah.
2 shopping centers catering to high-end brands that are so close to each other in 2 different jurisdictions.
Yeah.
What have we learned here about Barracks versus Stonefield?
I mean, I still stand by Barracks Road is the shopping center of Charlottesville. I mean, still, even, last year with, still things were a little dicey with Christmas shopping and people were being more careful with COVID, but still you have those families who come to Barracks Road, they split apart, and everybody is able to shop, whether it's kids for their parents and mom shopping for dad, everybody's able to find a place to shop at Barracks Road, and I don't think you can, there isn't anything that compares to that. And that is obviously for us, the type of business we are, Christmas is huge. That month of December is huge, and Barracks Road is the place to be year round, but particularly at Christmas time. There's nothing that compares to that.
Let's talk about let's talk about the need to continue evolving. And we should talk about, Patty made this comment about offering experiences in retail.
Yeah.
Patty Zeller of Animal Connection. She talked about you yesterday on her show, the experiences that you guys offer and how they differ for something online or a big brand like Williams-Sonoma.
Sure. I mean, definitely, I think that's one thing that we bring to the table, the Happy Cook, is unfortunately, it takes a lot of work, right? You can't be lazy in business these days. It's always evolving and changing and different things. And so we are doing it from all sides, whether it's, that people can come in the store and shop and get that great customer service from our amazing staff I just mentioned, to the fact that they can come in and take cooking classes and interact with our chefs. And then they can also shop online from, their couch at night for local delivery, and they can get it local pickup. And we offer these international, cooking classes digitally to people internationally and people all over the country. And then we also we've grown our internet presence substantially. So we have a pretty robust internet business now, shipping products all over the country. So we definitely try to, we kind of are jack of all trades, doing a little bit of everything. Our core focus is our Charlottesville community. So that's our most important thing. We want the in-person experience and that experience for our local customer to be the best. But yeah, we're also, doing all sorts of other things just to keep pertinent and diversified. And we've been around for over 40 years, and I think that's what's going to continue to have the brand continue to just flourish, is by doing all that.
Do you feel like you've become more of a content machine than ever before? Because, you guys, and I got to give you props. This is my business. You guys get the content marketing aspect like better than just about anybody. You guys are a content powerhouse.
Yeah, and I think that because of some of the evolving of some of this digital stuff that we've been doing with digital classes and digital things like that, I think even more so. And during COVID, that was one thing, is we had lots of extra time because we didn't have customers in the store, but we had a lot of staff we were keeping busy. So we were particularly doing lots of, videos for cooking, like demonstrations and interacting with people digitally and stuff like that. So that was something that we went really deep into, particularly during those like quieter times. We're kind of spread thin, so we don't do it quite as much right now, just because with retail being so busy and supply chain being so difficult. So some of that stuff's kind of slowing us down. But yeah, for sure, like that's become a huge aspect probably that I wouldn't have identified 10 years ago.
Melanie, Norman, Britt, giving you some props right now. You got 2 TV stations watching Monique on the show as we speak. Do we think that the supply chain shortages and or inflation is going to impact your business moving forward? Or do we expecting some of these supply chain issues to work themselves out and maybe inflation to subsidize a little bit?
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Do you think about this?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Every day. We were hit very hard by a lot of price changes. We used to get, yearly, at once a year, we'd have a new price list and a few things would change every year from every brand. Last year, most brands had at least 3 price changes. And because of the way the marketplace is regulated and being now an online retailer as well, we're bound to sell things at minimum pricing. So we cannot, they tell us what we have to sell it for, our brands do. Which means if they have a price increase, they will email us and say, you have not raised your prices yet. We'll get an email at 1 a.m. of the day that the price change happened. So we have to kick those price changes up immediately to stay compliant. And it was a lot. There were a lot of them. And more than the industry's ever had. And products, companies were often shipping 30 to 50% of what we ordered. So we would have to do it was a lot more work to get the product in the store. So we started in March last year, planning for Christmas last year. So where we normally would do that more in June. It seems like it's getting a little better. I would say that companies have more stock available to ship, but it's still dicey, and the price increases are happening still rapidly.
You have a handful of retailers in downtown Charlottesville and on West Main, friends of mine that are watching the program right now. What's the advice you offer the retailers? Because you guys are doing it right.
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, diversifying, focusing on being able to offer that amazing experience to whoever is walking in the door, focusing on that first, but also I think just making so a holistic experience for the customer. And then just from a business sense perspective, if you can diversify what you offer to beyond that, that's what I think can really help. Particularly, I think we've all learned with COVID, when all of a sudden you have no customers walking in the door. How do you thrive through that? Well, when you're able to be diversified and shift to other things, that sure helps. And so, we hope that we don't have anything that we have to worry about like that in the future, but who knows what, I think that the diversification has become more and more important, seeing that.
What keeps you up at night?
Kids? No.
Besides your kids?
Besides my kids. No, I mean.
Does anything keep you up at night?
No.
Really?
No,
That's great.
I'm a super like compartmentalized, take care of my stuff when I need to. Yeah, normally if I'm up at night, it's because of my either 7, 9, or 11-year-olds got something going on. But yeah.
What do you? Okay, how about this question? What is the headwind or challenge that you're most concerned about for business?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think inflation is I think that we're in a unique place with a lot of money in the marketplace because people aren't traveling, people aren't really thinking about their dollars and cents. But when I'm watching some of these prices go up massively on already expensive brands, I mean, a lot of these brands have turned into just pure luxury brands, almost like some of them talking about your Wusthof and Le Creuset and stuff because their prices have gone up so much.
Like put it in like tangible perspective.
Yeah, like how much
Yeah.
they've gone up. Like a piece of Le Creuset that has gone, like I don't know, like about a 5.5 quart. I don't have it right in front of me, but was already expensive at $400 and is now $460. I mean,
That's a lot.
big chunk
Yeah.
up.
We're talking about 11.5% there.
Yeah, a Perry knife from Wusthof that went from 2 years ago on promo for $40 is now $105. I mean, that's
That's a knife.
insane.
Yeah.
It's okay right now. Like they're fine. I don't know. I feel like some of these companies are doing some price changes and because of the conditions, it's okay. But I'm like, where is this going to go? Like, what does this look like in 2 years? I don't know. That's probably my biggest concern is it works now. Nobody ever decreases the price.
I was just going to ask that. So it will not, this is the price.
I mean, it almost never happens. They don't. I mean, it's just, I would be shocked if it did. There's a few companies that have done them in a way where they're talking about them as freight surcharges. So those, I think they're in the anticipation that they're going to back that away. But most are not. And in the history of working at the Happy Cook and doing purchasing, we don't see prices go down. They go up. So that's where I'm most concerned is what does these changes now, what does this look like in 2 years? And does that have an impact on that?
Do you, how does the rise in, say, groceries? So my wife and I, grocery shopping, bring in our son. No, we're always mindful of the bill, like
Right.
everybody is.
Yeah.
Like most people are. And, under $200 used to be no problem.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, forget about it.
Yeah.
What's the impact of grocery bills going up have on the business?
I mean, in a tangible way, I mean, we see it in our cooking classes, the chef's bills, like what they're, to get just to host the cooking class, we're seeing the exact same thing. A simple class that, used to cost, $15 a head's up to, $20 on simple. And the other things that have had a hard time just finding the products, like weird things that everybody's out of has become very difficult. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just overall, of course, when you're paying more for everything, it's going to start, it's going to catch up. Even in an affluent area like Charlottesville, that's going to start, making things tighter. Yes, that definitely does concern. I think that's probably the biggest concern I have is the price changes, inflation that we're seeing.
Now, a response to that could be the restaurants are feeling the same pinch.
Yeah.
And interestingly, and I'm curious because I learned from our guests here, if the restaurants, when you go out to a restaurant now, and we love to support the restaurants. I know you and Steve love supporting the restaurants and the chefs too.
For sure.
It's not cheap.
No. Yeah.
Okay, it's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
If the restaurant experience continues to get more and more expensive, which we know it will be,
Right.
how does that impact the Happy Cook?
Right. Well, in
Is
some
that
extent, for sure. I mean, ever since the pandemic struck, people have been spending more time in the kitchen. It's actually kind of amazing, like people who we hear all the time. I never cooked, ever. And now, because I was stuck in my house, I learned to cook. And they love it. And they went from somebody who was like, nope, I eat out all the time, to somebody who loves cooking. And now they're into baking and they're buying baking supplies. So that has been very good for our business, just in general. But I do think that in general people are eating out less because it is now more expensive per time out. So maybe you did cut down, like you splice out one time out. You have an extra night every week that you maybe would have gone out pre-COVID, and now you don't. So you're eating at home. Yeah, and the more time in the kitchen is overall good for us. And that definitely is something we have felt since the pandemic began.
We have Michael Payne coming up here in about 5 minutes, and you are phenomenal in this setting. You always do good in this setting. Advice that you would offer Charlottesville leadership, because we got to listen to folks like you that are. How many people do you have on your team?
We have about 15.
Okay, so
not counting the cooking school part. Yeah,
she's got a staff of 15. You're paying business tax.
Yeah.
Big time.
Real estate tax.
Through
Barracks Road.
Barracks Road. Astronomical.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yep. It
Okay.
is, because they made some change. They did a reassessment of Barracks Road's property a couple years ago.
And yours is a triple net lease, right?
Yeah. So we pay that.
Okay. So advice that you would offer city leadership?
I mean, yeah, I have to say that the real estate tax to me is we always talk about the housing costs here. And of course, if you're raising the real estate tax, what are landlords going to do? And you can't not pass that on. I feel like it's a constant conversation about how expensive it is to live here, just from a rent or more perspective. And I don't know, that compounds the issue to me. That's, obviously I personally don't want to see it go up, just from knowing that that's going to add a good chunk to my monthly payment to Barracks Road. It's going to pass through them to go to the city. But I know that the money has to come from somewhere.
Do you feel like the city, and I'm challenged with this question, do you feel like the city is supportive of us as small business owners?
I do know that they had many programs that were very helpful during COVID. I know that we did have a variety of very helpful people that we worked with. There was grants. I think that they are very well intending in trying to be supportive of businesses. I think sometimes some of these policies, like I said, you need to get the funds from somewhere, so you got to try to figure out where to get them. Which is why I'm not in politics, because I don't want to have to navigate that myself. I think the city does try to be supportive, but sometimes I think the businesses, we feel a little hamstringed.
Fantastic interview. How about some closing thoughts for Charlottesville?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to all of the customers that have supported us throughout the years. It really has been amazing working with you all, and we just are looking forward to many years in the future. And we appreciate it, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Monique, thank you. Congrats on their success, guys. Great job.
Thank you.
Very well-earned success. They work very hard at the Happy Cook, and I've been, I think we all have been so impressed with this family-owned business. She is approaching 20 years of ownership, her family, of the Happy Cook, and you said over 44 for the brand? Over 44 years. That's 2 generations serving Charlottesville and Central Virginia, guys. So a lot we're going to cover with Michael Payne in here. T-minus 90 seconds or so, 120 seconds for Michael Payne, the city councilor, to come in our studio. He posted a very succinct outline on his Facebook page late last night that I want to talk about. Thank you, Monique.
Thank you.
That I want to talk about with him when he gets here, about the plight the city of Charlottesville is in from a financial standpoint. And I don't want to use words like bleak, but our financial plight as a city is going to force leadership to make some difficult decisions. So one of those decisions I feel like we've covered well and are offered perspective for you, and it's this 10-cent real estate tax rate increase that's now advertised in the newspaper. We know, and we've covered this over the last couple weeks, I think we were the first to bring this to your attention, that assessments in the city have upticked 12% on average across Charlottesville, Virginia. assessments impact disposable income. Inflation, as Monique has identified, impacts disposable income. And now a 10-cent real estate tax rate increase will impact disposable income. The question I ask, I think it's a fair one. We're going to do this tax rate increase potentially to fund school reconfiguration. And if this tax rate increase is being utilized to fund school reconfiguration, will the folks, the citizens that we're doing the school reconfiguration for, actually benefit from this project? It's such a catch-22. The project is not a switch that's flipped overnight. It's going to take considerable time to reconfigure the schools once we figure out where the money's going to come from. And during that considerable time period, will the citizens in Charlottesville that we're trying to serve to narrow the educational gap that's widened during this pandemic, will they in fact be gentrified out of the city because of increased overhead associated with their homes? This is the type of topic material that is crucial or indicative of how important local government is and the decisions that local leaders make, and why it's paramount for us as citizens and taxpayers to get engaged. The older I've gotten, certainly as I launched a business 14 years ago, got married, watched my wonderful wife birth our pride and joy, our son, I've felt more compelled to get engaged locally, because all this decision making directly impacts our lives and how we pay our bills. And I don't want anyone to get this misconception. I am all for, I think Judah as well, our director, Judah Wickower, all of us, okay? I don't want to speak for you guys, but all of us, we are all for educational gap closing. We are all for kids in this community, black, white, Puerto Rican, Haitian, rich, wealthy, middle class, poor, downtown Charlottesville, Rose Hill, Rugby, Greenbrier, Fifeville, Belmont. We're all for kids getting the best public school education humanly possible. Okay, we're all for that. But there's collateral damage to tax rate increases. And that collateral damage, unfortunately, impacts families living on the financial margin way more than deep-pocketed, resourced families. I am genuinely concerned, and we're going to have a very open discussion with Michael Payne here, who just notified us he's about 90 seconds away. I am genuinely concerned that this project is going to gentrify the population we're trying to serve through this project out of the city. And the 5 counselors we have now, this is not their fault. They are paying for their sins of their predecessors. And their predecessors, for a couple of decades, have not prioritized this project. And now we are in a state or a situation where the project not only must be prioritized, but it's become a necessity. It's tough, man. is absolutely tough. I think ideas like incremental sources, new sources of tax revenue should be discussed. Michael Payne offers perspective on some of these new tax revenue sources. I thought his outline, dude, for one thing you can say about Michael Payne is this dude is a hell of a writer, okay? And here are ways that you could potentially solve it. I don't think this is going to happen anytime soon, but and I'm going to read verbatim from his Facebook post. We could solve this budget situation with two new sources of revenue. A sales tax from the state, which would provide $12 million directly to school buildings, and or, this one's very intriguing, the University of Virginia starting a payment in lieu of taxes pilot program, which could bring in $9 million a year. Our esteemed counselor is here. Michael, when you're ready, we have a seat over here for you. We'll cover all these topics with him. I thought his outline was the best and most succinct outline I have seen so far on this topic. Lloyd, Counselor Mayor Snook has done a good job of outlining this as well. But this one right here is like common sense, straightforward, very easy to digest. Judah Wickhauer, we're going to go to the two-shot. If you can give me the thumbs up when we have the two-shot on screen. And okay, Counselor Michael Payne is here. First, A, thank you for joining us. B, good afternoon. And C, dude, this outline was like, you're a hell of a writer. You put this in like digestible, approachable way for us to understand that I have yet to see so far. What was the foundation of this, or what was the motivation behind doing this? And I noticed you have night owl schedule. What was the influence of doing this here? You just wanted the community to understand?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm on here today, is want to get the community as informed as possible about where our budget process is, the decisions in front of us, because this is, I think, arguably the most important budget cycle we've had maybe in decades or years, given that what we're looking at is going to have an impact on what the city can do for a decade plus. And quite frankly, I think up until this point, there's not a whole lot of awareness in the community of the actual decisions and trade-offs in front of us. There's not been a whole lot of involvement from the community in terms of letting us know what our priorities should be. So I just wanted to try to communicate to the public the state of our budget, the trade-offs in front of us, to have people informed and to be able to make their voice heard, because again, you know, we're looking at decisions that are going to have an impact for until 2032.
I mean, it's startling, and it's not being prioritized within this community. That's why I appreciated Councilor Payne's outline so much. What's going to happen here, man? We got a $75 to $100 million project that is needed. No doubt it's needed. We got an educational gap that's gotten worse because of the pandemic. Those are facts. We got an assessment, let's just use the number 12% for the sake of conversation here. It's a little under 12%, but 12% pretty darn close. Assessments have increased year over year in the city, 12%. We got Monique, who was just here, the Happy Cook, talking about the impact of inflation with disposable income. We got interest rates rising. I mean, this is literally a collision of like the worst KPIs possible for families, individuals, couples on the financial margin that don't have disposable income at their disposal.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenging budget situation as you outlined. I mean, even everything as is, you've got Charlottesville, which has had long-standing inequality. I think the pandemic has just accelerated that even more. As you said, 12% on average assessment increases. But if you look at neighborhoods, you have neighborhoods like 10th and Page where the average assessment increase is over 20%. So for the average household, without any tax increase being discussed, you're looking at around $400 on average increase in their tax bill. If you add a 10-cent real estate tax increase on top of that, you're looking at about an increase in 1 year of $800 on average. And certainly there's some folks who can afford that. There's plenty of people whose homes have gone up in value and they also have a lot of income, and they can handle it, they can afford it. The problem is there's a lot of other folks who are living on Social Security, retirement, fixed income, working class, who maybe bought their home in 70s, 80s, 90s. in some cases, again, I mean, you see some homes with no improvements having been made, the assessment jumping from 300,000 to 600,000 in 1 year. It creates the pressure that we've seen in Washington, D.C., San Francisco, a lot of other cities where longtime residents basically just sell their homes and move.
That's gentrification.
Yeah, and that is a huge driver of gentrification. And the other side of the budget is there's that, and then inflation on top of that in terms of what people are needing to pay. The 10-cent real estate tax increase is eye-popping, and I understand why, very understandably, but just as eye-popping, I think, should be for the community, is that the current state of our budget is even if we increased the real estate tax by 10 cents, we would still freeze our ability to make any substantial new investments for about a decade. What does that mean practically? That means that for a decade, there's no money to fully fund our adopted affordable housing strategy at $10 million a year. There's no money to invest in the next phases of public housing redevelopment in West Haven, Mickey Drive, and other sites. There's no money for the recently proposed Piedmont Housing Alliance affordable housing projects on Park Street. There's no money to expand service for CAT, to implement our climate action planning process. I mean, any policy issue you want to name is frozen. And on top of that, there's no money to really invest in the city departments, which means that operationally, the city is going to find it very challenging to have a workforce that can do all the things that we want to do. And obviously, we've got a lot of rebuilding we have to do already in terms of City Hall. We know there's a lot of deferred departmental requests, staff positions even needed for just implementing the affordable housing strategy. So it's a tough budget situation, and the biggest drivers are school reconfiguration. The proposal is $80 million for one building, Buford. When you get to the second phase of the project, Walker, you're talking about an additional 20 to 30 million. And you wouldn't get to Walker for a decade, given our budget situation. And again, that is with a 10-cent real estate tax increase, which we also would have no plan to limit displacement caused by it, because our tax relief program has limits. 10% of people who qualified last year were kicked out. So that's a whole lot, but it just gives a sense of how real the budget crunch is, and how, quite frankly, I think where the budget is right now is not realistic. As I said, I think it's reckless. I mean, to put ourselves in a position where we can't make new investments for a decade. I mean, what happens if you have an unexpected infrastructure need, like Smith Aquatic Center, which had an air quality control issue we had to fix? There's no room to do anything about it. And again, I don't think the public has been fully engaged and aware of exactly what the budget situation is and the decisions in front of us, which is why, I'm on here and posted that, is to try to engage the community in that conversation and have people lend their voice to, okay, what do you want to see prioritized? Do you think this makes sense? Do you think it's a good idea to freeze our budget for a decade and increase real estate taxes by 10 cents, or should we look at some other things?
Can you cut everything he just said there into a highlight reel so we can just post succinctly later today across social media? Because that was perfectly said. This is just a fair response. How did we get in this position?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of reasons. One is the bill for a lot of things that previous councils had committed to are just coming due. Anytime you're issuing bonds to do infrastructure projects, that's a bill that can take a couple years to come due. I think council, and I'll definitely include myself in this, for several years has not done enough strategic planning and thinking 5-10 years out, really beyond even 10. I mean, we should be thinking 50 years out for a lot of these decisions. And I think a lot of that is also the turnover in the city manager's office. I've been on council and we've gone through, 4 or 5 city managers. And so in that situation, it's pretty hard to do long-range budget planning. And I think that's how it got us in this decision, because we never sat down, and again, I include myself in this for sure, and had an honest conversation with ourselves and our community and our staff about, okay, this is our budget. We say we want to do these things. What will it mean to plan it, to prioritize, and to plan to have the funding in place? Because I think we've been in a position where it's one of those things where if everything's a priority, nothing is really a priority. And that's sort of been the situation we've been in. And so that's how I think we've got here. And it was possible to sort of kick the can down the road of this discussion because the bills weren't due yet. So it would be, a year or two in the future, then we would need to look at tax increases or reprioritizing our expenditures. But it's this budget cycle where it's not theoretical anymore. We have to make the decision. Do we pay for it? And if so, how? And what do we decide to cut? Because the other thing is, again, even if we adopted the budget as is, everything in it, that still is cuts. The cuts are everything we don't invest in for a decade. We just don't see that and maybe don't think of them as cuts, but that's what it would be.
So, just trying to set expectations here. This 10-cent real estate tax rate increase, it's got sticker shock, which we all can appreciate and empathize with. Should we expect that this is going to be needed next year as well, and the year after? I mean, because it sounds like this. You just outlined it perfectly. This 10-cent real estate tax rate increase is only for this one project.
Mm-hmm.
So, are we going to have to expect this year after year after year?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I don't think the plan is for that, but certainly, if we reached a point where, we increased it 10 cents this year, moved ahead with everything in the budget, again, we're still freezing our budget for a decade. And so if there was emergency infrastructure need or something came up that the community said, this is a huge priority that we must do, in order to fund it, you would need tax increases. Whether that would be a wise idea or the community would actually want to increase them further, I don't know. And again, I think when you look at our tax rate, our real estate tax rate, 95 cents, that rate is lower than some peer localities. So is our meals tax compared to other localities. So I think, there's a long-term conversation about how do we have a more sustainable tax rate if we're going to make all the investments we want to make. And long-term, I think there's room for it. But of course, the other context is what matters really more than that rate for what people pay. People don't care what the rate is. They care what the dollar amount they pay each year is. And so obviously the important context is what is the median home value? What have the assessment increases been, not just this year, but historically? And how do we have a tax relief program that for those who will face gentrification and displacement pressure from this, how do we ensure that they get tax relief? And we don't have answers to those questions. So again, the point is, for me is, again, to afford everything in our budget, we need that 10-cent real estate tax increase. But I think to do a 10-cent real estate tax increase, I think there's a lot of questions about whether that is a wise idea, especially when we don't have any plan to make sure that our tax relief program is robust enough to cover folks who, again, are retired on Social Security, working class, who $1,000 bill, increase in their bill is going to be pretty substantial and meaningful in their budget. And again, there's plenty of folks in Charlottesville who that's not the case for, they can afford it. But again, you canvass in 10th and Page or walk around the community, there's plenty of folks who that's going to mean a lot of pain.
And as you've identified, and guys, please read Michael Payne's Facebook posts. He did it last night. It is the cleanest, most succinct, easily digestible outline of the plight we are in that I have read so far. I mean, I cannot say it any more clearly than that. I read it last night while sitting in bed, and I'm like, I get it. And that's why he did it. I've been asking this question for 2 weeks, maybe for a month. If we do this school, and I always have to stipulate it this because I don't want someone to see us as someone who's not prioritizing narrowing the educational gap. I'm all for kids learning in the most efficient and best ways possible. But Councilor Payne, if we do this school reconfiguration project, and it takes so long to do, and it's done through real estate increases, tax increases on real estate, won't this gentrify or push out the citizens we're trying to do the project for?
I think it's an important question on two levels. One is how will our assessments with 10-cent real estate tax increase on top of that, without any plan to expand our real estate tax relief program, how will that create greater gentrification and displacement? And I think there's a second level too, which is if we can't fund our affordable housing strategy for a decade, We don't have any plan for how we're going to invest in, West Haven, Piedmont Housing Alliance proposed projects, the impact that will also have on people's ability to even live in Charlottesville and be part of the school system. And so those are tough questions, but I think they're very important ones. I think we've got to step back and take the politics out and just look at what is the good decision for the community, what is good public policy, and everything is trade-offs. So how do we evaluate the trade-offs of making this decision versus the other? What do we expect to gain specifically from it? And what do we lose by what we couldn't invest in? And I think that's a very important question. As you said, the current proposal for school reconfiguration is $80 million for one building, Buford.
And it came in high in the first round, right?
Yeah. Well, and I should say what's in the budget is $75 million. I'm using $80 million, but yeah.
Because it came in at 81, 82, right?
Yeah, and what's in the budget is 75, and of course with inflation, not just for this project, but projects across the board, I think you could pretty reliably count on that the cost is going to go up, not down, and as you said, it already went over budget. And again, that's for one building, Buford, and given the state of our budget, you wouldn't get to Walker for about a decade, and Walker would be the unified pre-K site. So you're talking about $80 million for one building, Buford, freezing investments for a decade and increasing the real estate tax by 10 cents. I'm not trying to be antagonistic or any way, but that is arguably the most...
You're being real.
Yeah, and it's arguably the most important decision that council has made, perhaps in decades, at least a decade plus. And I do think it would be irresponsible if council is not asking as many questions as possible about, okay, what are the trade-offs? What are we gaining from this? What are we losing? And also asking, just looking at it from every angle and asking every question. I mean, we've got to do whatever decision we come to is the right decision. We shouldn't just blindly move ahead. We need to step back and again, take the politics out of it, ask questions and just look at what is the best public policy and look at education. When it comes to education, I think our biggest goal is what investments reduce our achievement gap and how do we look at students from a holistic perspective. Obviously, four walls don't teach a kid. And again, to be clear, the schools, have been saying that themselves as well, and they're prioritizing investments in staff and teachers. I don't want to make it seem like that, but we got to look at the whole picture, be realistic about it, and also look at what does it mean for kids if we don't have investments in housing. We're not able to invest in West Haven.
Yeah, they can't live here.
New housing units, food security. So all of that is part of a bigger picture, and then also how do we be realistic about additional revenue sources that we will need that might not be the city. There's legislation in the General Assembly to approve a sales tax, which would provide $12 million a year just to school buildings, and that would cover school reconfiguration.
There's lukewarm momentum behind that, though.
Yeah, and I think. And on that, the state Senate passed it on, broad bipartisan support, 28-12. It did die in a House subcommittee, but crossover, which is where any bill that passed in the state Senate but not the House will go to them again and vice versa, begins February 15th. And I do think that there's a real chance that it passes because more than Charlottesville, really, Southwest Virginia is desperate for school funding because, unlike Charlottesville, their main industries have left, their tax base and population is declining, so their schools desperately need money. Across the state, Petersburg, Richmond, they need money for schools, and in fact, in the state Senate, the Republican leader in the state Senate sponsored legislation. And there's indications that there's Republican support in the House of Delegates. So even if it didn't happen this year, I do feel like there's a very real chance that it happens because it doesn't matter if you're in a Republican or Democratic district, school funding is desperately needed.
It's bipartisan.
And then the second point I would add in terms of additional revenues is looking at UVA, who does not pay property tax in the city. They pay the city about $33,000 a year in property taxes.
Which is startling.
Yeah, and last I looked, they would pay the city $9 million a year if they did pay the same rate as everyone else. So that would be $9 million of revenue annually. and looking at how do we step back and say, let's be honest and realistic with both ourselves and the public. We're going to need some of those things to move forward with everything in our budget. And that's something that people may not want to hear, and I understand that. I understand the frustrations, but I'm just looking at the numbers, and the numbers are the numbers, and we can't run a deficit.
So, I mean, I got to ask a straightforward question here, Councilor Payne. Am I reading you correctly that maybe school reconfiguration should not, maybe we don't move forward with this?
I'm not saying that, but at all. But I think as council, we've got to step back and look at our priorities and look at and moving the conversation away from just yes or no about something and to what does it look like to make a realistic plan to get here. And school reconfiguration is one of those conversation points, but there are other priorities in our budget. We can ask that about as well. And that's going to be a difficult conversation, but I do think that's one we need to have. And I think it's the elephant in the room. But as council, we're not going to be able to have serious discussions until we get there. And I think that's why the 10-cent real estate tax was even advertised, is because council was not in a place yet where we were having a discussion about realistically what our trade-offs are and what we're going to need to do. And so instead of having that conversation, we advertise a 10-cent real estate tax increase because, kicks that can down the road for a couple of weeks. Because again, to afford what's in our budget is that 10-cent real estate tax increase. But, I don't know how much counselors even want to move forward that if we don't have a clear plan for expanding our real estate tax relief program and actually having it fix the displacement and gentrification pressures it would cause. But yes, across the board, I think we need to step back and look at our priorities and have some conversations about how do we be realistic about this? Because as I said, this budget is flat out not realistic.
Yeah.
It's not serious where we are. And I think staff and council know that. It's just that we have to move forward and get to those decision points.
This paragraph of your analysis very much intrigued me. It was incremental sources of revenue, and I'll read it verbatim. We could solve this budget situation with two new sources of revenue: a sales tax from the state, which would provide $12 million directly to school buildings, and or UVA starting a payment in lieu of taxes pilot program, which could bring in $9 million a year. You then identify the number that UVA is paying in taxes. Was it $33,000?
Yeah, it's about $32,000 a year.
So what they should be paying UVA, or not should's not the right word. What UVA could be paying is $9 million. What they are paying now is $33,000.
Correct.
I would imagine that there would be tremendous resistance from UVA over flipping that switch to this pilot program. And I would imagine what UVA is going to leverage is they're going to leverage, we are the driver of the primary tax base to this jurisdiction because people come here for us, which is a fair leverage point here. What is the likelihood of a pilot program like this with UVA becoming a reality?
I think it's something that absolutely can come a reality. Will it happen this budget cycle? No. But long term, I think it can. Why? One, my memory is a little fuzzy, but I think UVA's annual operating budget is something like 1.8 or 1.9 billion. I could be off on that.
I can check it out.
But it's well over $1 billion. And of course, their endowment is tens of billions of dollars.
1.47 billion.
Okay, 1.47.
So you were pretty darn close.
So from UVA's perspective, $9 million in the context of a $1.4 billion operating budget is very feasible. And it's a much smaller percentage of their budget than ours. Our
Sure.
annual budget is around $190 million. The second reason is this is not a unique or novel idea. Harvard, Yale, University of Michigan, and many other institutions have payment in lieu of taxes programs that they've set up with their cities. And usually when they've started, they haven't paid 100% of what their real estate tax would be if they paid the same rate as everyone else. But I forget if it was Harvard or Yale, but one institution recently bumped it up to 100% of what they would have, and others have bumped it up to 75, 80%. So it's not unprecedented. Their peer institutions are doing it. And so really the request is just do what your other peer institutions are already doing. You have room in your budget to do it. And let's make it happen. And again, I know that that's not going to happen this budget cycle. That is a longer term lift. But I think if we can raise awareness in the community about it, if we can raise awareness from UVA student body and alumni and faculty, I do think there's real long term potential to make it happen. And I know UVA in recent years has made a lot more commitments to partnering with the community and giving back to the community. And I think this would absolutely be a critical part of that. And I know UVA is kind of like steering a oil tanker that it's an institution that anything is slow to happen, and I recognize that. But I think I don't think it's impossible or a complete fantasy.
You got a board of supervisor watching. You got a Crozet Community Advisory Committee member watching. You got Neil Williamson who's chiming in with some questions. Neil, I promise I will ask this. You got two media outlets watching you here. This is a fair question that's on the feed. The real estate tax rate increase that's being proposed, please ask Councilor Payne this, is considerably higher than what Albemarle County's is in some of the surrounding jurisdictions. Is Charlottesville not seeing the obvious that homeowners will just move to lower tax-based jurisdictions that are just a couple miles away?
Yeah, and if we raise the real estate tax by 10 cents, I think our real estate tax rate would be 20 cents higher than Albemarle.
Albemarle's, I think, is 84 cents.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're talking 30 cents there. Because you would go from 95, no, excuse me, you're right. You'd go from 95 to $1.05, so you're talking like 21 cents.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's a very fair question about, the regional impacts. And again, I think more than anything, and assessments are already doing this, and the real estate tax increase just throws fuel on that fire, is a lot of folks who just can't afford to live in Charlottesville anymore, if their homeowners will sell their homes and move to surrounding counties because they just can't afford it anymore. So no, I mean, I think that would definitely, unless we have a clear plan with specific numbers for how we can make our real estate tax relief program cover those who would face that pressure, and we don't have that plan, and it would require General Assembly action to make the changes necessary to make that happen. I think that's a very fair point. And again, I think advertising the 10-cent real estate tax increase was a good thing, because a lot of people who weren't paying attention before are now asking these questions. And my point is not that is, again, I think a 10-cent real estate tax increase, if you're not pairing it with a plan for the real estate tax relief program, is just a bad idea. It was advertised because, again,
But you had to.
if you afford everything in our budget, that's what required. And
Yeah.
so we can go below 10, but we can't go above it. So that's what was advertised. And so I think it's a starting point for an honest and realistic conversation, which I think the community is starting to engage in more, which I think is good. But no, it's a fair point. I mean, the assessments and that will definitely create displacement pressure. And again, even without a real estate tax increase, you've got average assessments going up over 20% in 10th and Page. That's going to be a huge problem. And it's also going to be a problem for renters, because some of that increase is going to get passed along to renters and their monthly rent when their leases come up for renewal. And then, of course, you can combine that with inflation as well. And a lot of people's wages are not keeping up with inflation.
Neil Williamson, this question. How do the budget challenges impact the city's AAA bond rating?
So I think that's one of the areas where we're in a good position. Unlike localities like Petersburg, for example, that had their bond ratings go down, we're not in a place where we are making a decision that would affect our bond rating. Our debt service payment to general fund ratio would still be in the 10% area, which is the guideline. So our bond rating's okay. The problem is what is practically affordable and what is necessary to afford it. So it's a little in the weeds, but in our capital budget, staff have a benchmark. They don't like to see the percentage of annual debt service payments compared to our general fund go over 10% as a budget practice. And if you went over that, you wouldn't necessarily lose your bond rating, but you would start to need to think about that territory. And we don't go over 10%. The problem is our annual debt service payments double, and it creates a $24 million deficit by 2030. But I do think if we were to move forward with this budget, because we are freezing our ability to make investments for a decade, I think we would start to enter territory where we're having very bad financial management of the city on council's public policy end. I don't think that would affect our bond rating, but it would start to get us into a territory where we're just making bad, unrealistic public policy decisions because, just even operationally, you can't make an investment in city staff for 10 years that's substantial. How are we going to have pay raises for staff to keep up with inflation in our wage and compensation study? How are we going to handle the fact that we have so many temporary employees who shouldn't be classified that way? Collective bargaining.
A lot of comments coming in. I am mindful of his time, guys, so we're going to try to cherry pick some of these comments for Councilor Payne. I was surprised by the resistance not resistance, but the slight friction that you received from, say, Matthew Gillikin about giving 6% raises. You saw it. You responded to it. Yeah, to city staff. And then is it an additional 3% raises proposed for fiscal year 2023?
Yeah.
You're the pro. From my standpoint, those raises were needed and behind. And if Charlottesville's going to have to fill these massive openings and attract legit talent, it's got to pay legitimate wage to equal other openings that are out there where talent can go to. Is that the right take?
That's what I would say. And again, we just got to be realistic. The basics of city government, the building block, is your staff. You need to build a strong, responsive organization if you want to do anything. Everything else you build on top of that. So I think the pay raises were absolutely necessary. Every other peer locality did pay raises. We're already behind when you look at inflation and our cost of living. To not do pay raises is going to make it way harder to attract people, way harder to make people stay, and they're going to look at, I can move to Albemarle County, if there's a job opening there, get paid, they're making raises to keep up with the cost of inflation. We just have to do it, and I can say for a fact that there is great talent who wanted to come to the city, but the issue of pay kept them away, and it's
city manager talent.
No.
Okay.
Other departments, but it's a real challenge, and it's a challenge on two levels. I think is one, you've also got a huge workforce of people who are making 15 or so hours or $15 or so an hour, who need pay raises to keep up with the cost of living and inflation in the city, who deserve to be paid well in the city, who keep the city running in public works, our bus drivers, Parks and Rec. There's that piece of it. And then there's a bigger issue with our staff pay that we still haven't addressed that is vital, which is we're undergoing a wage and compensation study to look at pay throughout our organization. And we've got huge problems throughout the entire city government in terms of people's classification, pay raise scales, and having that in a clear, structured way, and also handling all these people who are technically temps, who work full-time, who maybe have been working for the city for 10, 15, 20 years, but are classified as temps and not getting health insurance and full benefits. And you've also got that problem in public transportation. That's a problem we've got to fix. You've got to invest in your workforce to have a functional government and implement the public policy we want to see. So anyway, that was a long-winded answer.
No, that was a great answer.
I think it's one of those things we have to do.
This question is a fair one. School reconfiguration is going to cost us as taxpayers $100 million minimum, and we're not going to see the results, as Councilor Payne has indicated, for maybe a decade. Is there concerns at all that the school learning environment won't be in a structured building a decade from now?
Yeah, I don't know too much of the detailed plan that VMDO, who's been working on the plans and working with the school board and sort of task force of city council. I don't know how much they've gotten into sort of the phased construction impacts. They may have already answered. I just don't know it, so I just don't know the answer. But there's a lot of fair questions about that investment. And the other question, which I think we need to ask, is again just what in specifics, with data and research behind it, is the return and benefit we should expect from that investment? And we need to ask that question for all our investments. For affordable housing, I can look at the numbers and tell you what projects are in the pipeline for affordable housing that need local funding for low-income housing tax credits. You can get it. It's going to be a little off, obviously, but you can get a pretty good sense of how many units that investment can make, the AMI levels, and the amount of matching funds it could unlock. We've got, in the past we'd ask questions about the proposed parking garage project. So I do think we need to be looking at every project and asking the questions of, in specifics and specific detail, with, to the best of our ability, data and research behind it, what do we expect the benefit to be compared to these other things we can invest in, and that to guide our decision making.
Is there a scenario where the reconfiguration does not happen?
It's tough to say. Is there a scenario in which we have to say, to move forward with this, we're going to need some additional revenues from the state, possibly UVA? To me, that's a scenario that we should at least be willing to discuss. At this point, I don't think we should be locked into a scenario, but how I'm thinking of it is we should sort of almost think of like, let's lay out all the options, almost create like a matrice of this is option A, B, C, the trade-offs, and go from there. And we haven't even created that yet. So that's the first step. And in that, there's all kind of different scenarios, and I do think one of them, probably has to be, if we're going to move forward with this, how do we get the state revenue to do it? And that may be, again, maybe we look at the options in front of us and we decide that that's not a good choice, that's not the best one, but we've got to entertain every idea, and there's a reason, we've put off those conversations, because they are a little uncomfortable, they are tough. No matter what decision we make, some people are not going to get everything they wanted immediately, but I think it's the conversation we're going to have.
All right, this is the last one I have. Well, last one, and then a final word for you. And this is a follow-up to one that was asked before, because I'm seeing the temperature on the feed here and what people are saying. I'm not trying to assume here, so I'm going to ask this question. It seems to me that the likelihood of another real estate tax rate increase next year and maybe the year after is extremely strong. Is that a safe statement?
I wouldn't say that.
You would not say that?
No.
With the back against the wall, how we are?
I think...
Because I think that, and you're the pro here, I think that as a revenue source, and obviously folks that watch the show know I'm opposed to this, but that as a legitimate revenue source is going to be sooner or more tangible or quicker than this pilot program, which I think is a great idea. I think it's a freaking, especially when you outline that UVA is paying $33,000 for the real estate that they own in the city. Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. When the on paper is $9 million, that is startling. I don't think anyone really realized that until you put the numbers down. But that is going to have serious resistance from the influencers at UVA.
Sure. So I would, you never know, but I certainly don't think that's a done deal in terms of, a 10-cent real estate tax increase of this year and then additional ones. The state of our budget, again, if we were to afford everything in it, and that would be necessary to make it affordable. So if we were to assume we're just going to keep everything in our budget as is, that would be the case. To afford it realistically, you would need 10 cents this year, and
next year and the year after, most likely,
and some level of tax increase, because you've got to assume unexpected infrastructure needs are going to come up. You're going to need to make investments in
inflation,
staffing shortages, collective bargaining. our wage and compensation study, and the fact that you have 10 positions in the fire department which were paid for with one-time CARES Act money that we haven't yet budgeted to pay for permanently. You've got requests from the fire department for upgrades to one of their stations, for pay raises for firefighters, and that's just one example. Across the board, in our first budget presentation, it showed us that we have $10 million in deferred departmental requests. Some of those have been put off for years, and if we don't make those investments, they're going to have major impacts on, for example, NDS's ability to implement our affordable housing strategy. So, yes, to afford everything in our budget as is would realistically require 10 cents this year, and then I don't know if it would be 10 cents, but additional ones certainly at some time over the next 10 years. We also, to be fair, we also tend, we do use conservative budget assumptions. Our actual growth tends to overperform what is projected. So there's a little bit of that, but not enough to make up the whole difference. And of course, if you're talking a 10-year period, it's very possible you have a recession or some sort of downturn in the economy over that period that would also impact it. But I would say this, I think we just have to, again, pull back, take the politics aside, and look at where our budget is not realistic. To do that, a 10-cent real estate tax increase this year, again, with no plan for the real estate tax relief, and then need additional revenue increases to afford basic things like getting our fire department, keeping our staff up with inflation. That is irresponsible. It's a bad budget, and I certainly hope that's not the path we go down. I think we need to step back, lower expectations, and say, we're not saying no to things, but we're saying, how do we create a plan over several years to get there? And yes, it is going to require state revenues. It may require state revenues and also looking at private money in engaging UVA. And we're willing to all be unified in lobbying and organizing for those pushes in the General Assembly and at UVA. But yeah, it's going to take a little time because where we are net is not working. And for me, the biggest line in the sand is we have to maintain our affordable housing commitments to redevelopment of public housing. Certainly, and it's our formally adopted affordable housing plan, and that is particularly important because that is an issue where if we lose a decade of progress, you can't gain it back. There's an opportunity cost that goes away. For example, there was conversation during the last public comment or last meeting about the situation with Midway Manor. That is a property whose affordability period will end in 2023. We have Hearthwood, whose affordability period is going to end in 2026. If the city did not fund our affordable housing plan and had no strategy for how we're going to step in partnership with a nonprofit to maintain the affordability of those projects, they will become could very well become market rate. The existing tenants are evicted and they become luxury units. A lot of money to be made at Midway Manor doing that given its location. And if we miss that opportunity because we froze our budget, you can't get that back. Likewise, the only way you get new affordable housing construction is with low-income housing tax credits. You need local dollars to have any chance of being competitive in their point system to be awarded that money. So if you freeze that money, basically you're saying no new affordable housing construction. I don't think that's what the community wants to see, and to me, that's a line in the sand that we have to maintain that. And again, I think when you look at the trade-offs and the expected impact of investments, that is one where I say a very clear negative impact that we need to maintain, and we need to look at other things where, is it really so bad, and what is the impact if some other things we say? We're not saying no, we're just saying let's all come together to be realistic about the numbers, plan over a period of several years, and be unified in that push for additional revenue from the General Assembly and UVA and other creative sources. But again, council will make its decision, but where I'm at, I think this, as I said, this budget is not realistic, and it would be an extremely bad idea, just from a purely public policy standpoint, to increase our real estate tax by 10 cents and still freeze the rest of our budget for a decade. Maybe to others it doesn't sound as wild, but every time I say that, it sounds ridiculous.
It sounds ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous. Read Michael Payne's Facebook page and the outline on his Facebook page, and do it today, please. Thank you. He's bringing light and perspective to the plight we are in. J-Dubs, if we could offer some perspective here, some instruction to Michael Payne here. We appreciate you being on the show today. I'll close with some thoughts on some topics for today. I want to thank Monique for being on the program. She was absolutely fantastic. She's the owner of The Happy Cook. And I'm grateful for Councilor Payne for joining us on the show, and I very much encourage anybody that's watching to go to his Facebook page again and read this analysis. It is the best, most digestible version of our plight that I've seen so far. I'm very grateful for you guys asking the questions. I'm sorry I was not able to get to all these. It is 1:50 p.m. and we're mindful of Councilor Payne's time here on the program. We're also going to reach out to a couple of the other councilors to get their perspective on the show, including our neighbor down the hallway, Mayor Snook, to see his take and thoughts on the show of what's going on. We are undoubtedly going to have to compromise. I think that's a message that Councilor Payne, made very clear. Compromise is going to be a must here, and we're also going to have to prioritize, and we're also going to have to hope that the General Assembly offers some funding that is desperately needed. And the UVA concept is a novel one. $33,000 the university is offering the city of Charlottesville on $9 million of on-paper offerings. Think about that. That's the show. I'm Jerry Miller. Thank you for joining us. Take care. Michael, thank you.